Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Dad Bod Pod, a place for men to learn, grow, and live the healthiest life possible. I'm your host, Jason Priest, and I'm very excited for today's guest. Before we dive into that, if you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Dad Bod Pod Nation. Highly encourage you to go back and check out some of the prior episodes. There's a ton of valuable content to help motivate, inspire, and have you on the path to becoming the healthiest version of yourself. If you're a longtime listener, thank you guys so much for being here. You know, we appreciate your support. Many of you have connected with us in our Facebook group or on a personal level on some type of social media. So thank you for this continued support. And if you get value out of today's episode, man, just do us one favor. We don't run ads. We highly respect your time. But if you could take 10, 15 seconds out of your day, drop us a quick review. That's what helps grow the show. We don't make money off this show. We're literally here to make an impact, and we want to help make an impact on the male obesity epidemic in our country as much as we possibly can. So thank you guys for anything you can contribute to the show. And you guys are going to love our guest today, man. I'm super excited to introduce Mr. Nelson Tressler. Nelson, early in life, was filled with trauma, struggle, and court trials. But although his childhood was something that many of us couldn't fathom going through, he was able to turn his life around in a positive way. He set goals, kept a positive mindset, and stayed accountable to his actions. He has developed the IGOTSMARTER app to help others do the same. You guys are going to love his story. So without further ado, Nelson, welcome to the show, man. I'm excited for our interview today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. So I don't have any script that I follow, but I do ask one question of anybody that comes on the show. And that's really just to get your take on where we stand as a country in terms of health. Obviously, our company is called Dad Bod Health. And so what is your take on not necessarily just the dad bod, but where we're at as a country in terms of health, pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and moving forward? You know, we're closing in. I think we're over 40% now in terms of obesity rate. The projection is by 2030, we'll be at 50%. And I personally think we get there by 2025 if I'm going to give you my honest opinion. And so it's a sad trend that we're seeing. So love to hear your take on that and kind of where we stand as a country.
Yeah, I mean, it's an epidemic. I mean, I think, when you're talking 40-50% of the population is obese, I mean, there's a real problem there. There's a real mindset there. But one of the things in our program we truly understand is health is wealth. When your health is not good, there's very few other things that are going to matter to you if you're not healthy and you're struggling with your health. So, I mean, that's one of the things we teach in our program is you've got to think health first. You've got to be healthy. You've got to have the energy. You've got to have, all that stuff to really work on the other areas of your life. So putting health at, the top of your list is definitely a good idea.
I can't agree more with you, man. And to be honest with you, I'm glad you brought that up because we say that a lot too, is that health is wealth. It's really the foundation of life, right? Like without it, you don't have much. And I often talk about, there's a lot of really wealthy people out there, even billionaires, who would gladly trade all of the money that they have for their health, right? Like it's just something that you can't put a value on it. And so I'm glad you went there, and that I find it awesome that you also value that so greatly in your program too, because at the end of the day, man, like again, without it, we don't have much. So moving forward and kind of transitioning into your story, I'll just tell you, when I first got your information and I read through it, I was like, man, like this guy's going to be pretty interesting to talk to. This guy, like we do a lot of tough love. But we also are very compassionate. Myself, Zach, Anthony, my business partners, there's a fine line between tough love and there's a fine and having compassion at the same time. Some people don't respond that well to tough love, and that's okay. But when I read through your story, like, one of my mentors, has a saying that's, excuse my language, but fuck your excuses. Right. And so FYE is kind of his little tagline there. Because he came from a really, really dark place as well. And so when I was reading through your story, I was like, man, this guy has a lot of similarities. Like he came from a really dark place and has turned his life around tremendously. And so that's the first thought I had. I'm like, he's a perfect fuck your excuses kind of guy. So tell us a little bit about your background, man, and share with us, whatever details you want to share, because when I read through your story, I was wowed. So, what's your take, and kind of give us a little bit of background about Nelson Tressler.
Yeah, so my mom became pregnant with me when she was 15 years old. And while she was pregnant with me, her father, who was the local trash collector in a small town in central Pennsylvania, drove into the town square. There he spotted two police officers. He stuck a gun out the window and opened fire on those police officers, killing one and critically wounding the other. And eventually my grandfather was captured and brought to stand trial, where he was facing the death penalty. And during his trial, my mom got up and testified that the reason that her father had shot and killed that police officer was that the police officer had raped her, and she was now pregnant with his baby, who was me. And that my mom's testimony worked. My grandfather's first trial ended in a hung jury. The second trial, they took the death penalty off the table. And eventually my grandfather was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, where he ended up spending the rest of his life, more than 40 years behind bars, leaving behind, my mom. She comes from a family of 15 children,
Wow.
that family. And then now me to kind of deal with the consequences of that. And if you've ever lived in a small town, people are up in your business,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and,
yes. That's crazy.
and with this, everybody knew what had happened. Everybody knew the circumstances surrounding my birth. And so I had to deal with that. And my mom's 15 years old when I'm born, and born into this. But eventually she does meet a man, and she gets married. And, come to find out that the man she married is an alcoholic, very physically and emotionally abusive to both me and her. And, quickly they have four children. And because of the lifestyle that they're living, I mean, a lot of the basic needs of my siblings is falling upon me as the oldest, diaper changing, bottle feeding, waking up in the middle of the night. And, I remember one day in the fourth grade, looking down at my report card, you get all excited at the end of the year to see who you're going to have in fifth grade and if all your buddies are going to be there with you. And I remember looking down and seeing straight F's on my report card. And that I wouldn't be going to fifth grade. I'd be repeating the fourth grade I had flunked. But, my mom would rather me stay home with her and help her take care of the kids than go to school. So I think I missed 40 or 50 or 60 days of school that year.
Wow.
So it shouldn't have come as a surprise. But, the next year I was placed into special ed, couldn't read, couldn't write, couldn't spell. Come to find out I had dyslexia. And, then one day my stepfather was walking home drunk from a bar, and somebody else was driving home drunk from that bar, and they ended up hitting and killing him. And, now my mom here, she's dropped out of school in the 8th grade. She's lived a horrible life to this point. And as bad as my stepfather has been to her and us kids, losing him pretty much broke her. And it left her with zero hope and zero possibilities of how she was going to care for her family. And, shortly after he died, my mom decided that she was going to take her own life. And, fortunately, she was not successful. But after she had gotten out of the hospital, it was then she determined that she was not going to be able to care for all 5 of us. And that's when my family got split up. And I went to go live with my grandmother, who's the wife of the man who shot and killed the police officer.
Holy cow, man. Like that. I don't know that, we try to find a silver lining in any story, right? But like, I don't know that that it's hard to pull positives out of that. So let me ask you this. So when this all happened, how old was your mom when she decided that family's going to have to split because she wasn't going to care for them anymore? Like, how old was she at that time?
25 or 26.
Okay. So, and she had you when she was 15, right? So,
yep.
Wow. That is quite the story, man. Like, I got to tell you, I don't think I've had a guest on here yet that's had quite the backstory of that. So I'm excited to see where this goes, because I know you've obviously turned your life around and accomplished some great things. So, going back to the small town piece, I spent about I spent 1 year of high school in rural Virginia, of all places, and I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas, like at Allen High School. It's now like a powerhouse high school. A lot of NFL guys come out of there. And I think it's hilarious because when I was there, like we were a town of 40,000. Our football team was trash. But anyway, I moved from Allen to this rural town in Virginia, and it was called Montpelier, Virginia, a tiny little town. And so when you made that reference, like when you're a small town person, like everybody's up in your business. That's it. You couldn't be, it couldn't be more true. Like everybody knows everything about everyone in the town when it's like that. And so I can't imagine how challenging that was for not necessarily you at that age, but your family. Like that's, man, like that's such trying times. And so, so do you still communicate with your mom at this point in your life?
Oh yeah. I mean, my mom's my biggest fan, and
That's
she,
awesome.
and that's the great thing about this story. I mean, you find a silver lining, my mom, and I talk about this in my book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, addition by subtraction. And a lot of times in life, we have to get rid of something in order to get something bad to get something good. And, whether that's eating habits or routines or whatever, we have to get rid of something bad to get something good. And a few years after my first stepfather died, my mom met another man who would become my stepfather. And he was the total opposite of what my first stepfather was. I mean, he treats my mom like a queen and raised my three other younger brothers as his own. It's the funniest thing. He's like 5'3", red hair. My other brothers are all like 6'4", and, he introduces them as his son, not as his stepson, but as his son. And, people will raise their eyebrows, here's this little redheaded, 5'3" guy sitting next to a 6'4", and he's introducing them as his son. And, people are like, man, your wife's got some explaining to do, but he's, he's raised these boys and me to some extent, later on in life. But my mom couldn't be happier now. I mean, they've been married for 35 years. They're living a great life. They're great grandparents. They travel, and that's like a message of hope, because as deep and as dark as her life was, I mean, so deep and dark that she wanted to take her own life, here 35, 40 years later, she couldn't even imagine that life. And that's the one thing that we have to do, is keep that hope and understand that we're not the person that we're not the person that we're always going to be. And my mom's life is that, and mine to some extent too.
I love that, man. And, the next topic that I want to bring up is very much that. And, we have a saying in terms of health, myself and my business partners, it's very much around, it's not who you are, it's just where you're at. Right. And so like, if you're a guy out there that needs to lose 30, 50, 80, 100 pounds, you can't do anything about what the past has brought you. Right. Hindsight is always 20/20, and life is a journey, and you have to embrace it as such. And so the reality is that wherever you're at in life, like if as long as you have hope, then you have a path to a better future. And your mom's story, and yours, I mean, let's be honest, like you were young, and you were, we won't call it a victim, but you were, a victim of your circumstance, for lack of a better term. And we'll get to that in just a second. But the reality is you at that point in your life had zero control over that. And your mom really didn't have a whole lot of control either. The one thing she did have control over is taking her own life. And luckily that failed. I lost my mom when I was 25, she was 49. And look, man, like that was one of the probably the worst day of my life till this day. And it devastates me. My mom is not a part of, obviously can't be a part of my son's life, both of my son's life. I have a 5-year-old and a 5-month-old, and it pains me because my mom wanted nothing more than grandkids. And so I love that you have a silver lining to this story. And I find it amazing that your mom went from like the deepest, darkest place that most people could ever imagine being in, and then dealing with the murder and all those things that she had to deal with at such a young and fragile age, the rape, the murder, all of that stuff, to now now living a life where she's fulfilled and happy and has you very much a part of her life and her other kids. Like that's that's all about hope, man. And so I love that you went there. I'm very grateful that you shared all that with me. So what I want to bring up next is very much based around that. And it's, from murder to millions, right? So you're not a victim of your circumstances, but a product of your choices. And so you technically were a victim of your circumstances because you didn't have any other choice at that time, at being at a young age, if you were. But let's expand on that concept, because I love, when I read that, when the first time that I read that you were not a victim of your circumstances, but a product of your choices, that's what made me think of, what our little saying is. It's not who you are, it's just where you're at. So talk through that, if you will, and share a little bit of insight on what that means to you.
Yeah. So, this story that I just told you, eventually, in my life, I went to go live with my grandmother. One day, a counselor came from the local university to talk about what you needed to do to get into college. And, at this time in my life, I'm in special ed. I can't read, can't write. But I start thinking, man, if I could graduate from college, the rest of my life would be a cakewalk. And, that was the mindset that I had. And, what happens when you start telling yourself you're going to do something that is going to be difficult? That voice in the back of your head just starts screaming at you all the reasons, not only that you can't do it, but you shouldn't even try. And I remember sitting there thinking, Nelson, you can't read, you can't write, you can't spell. You're in special ed. Of the family that I came from, those 15 children in my mom's family, 2 had ever graduated from high school. None had ever even attended college. And, but I determined I'm going to go for it. I had no other options. I mean, I saw
what do you have to lose at that point, right?
Exactly. I saw the direction I was going. And you know what? I didn't like it. And so the next day I started to kind of make those choices. But long story short, it took me 12 years from setting that goal. It took me 12 years, 4 different universities, 4 years in the United States Air Force, but I became that first person to graduate from college. And that's whenever I realized the power of goals and the power of personal development. And over the last 20 years since I've graduated from college, I've used that in every area of my life, relationships, my health, financial, business, spiritual, lifestyle. And what I determined is you can accomplish any goal that you put your mind to, as long as you have enough time, enough energy, and enough focus. And, I've used that in every area of my life over the last 20 years, and I've had some good success. I went into real estate sales out of college and became the number 1 top salesman, worldwide for a top 5 commercial real estate firm in my classification. I've built more than 10 businesses, including one of the largest privately owned pet resorts in the country. I just celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary, to my wife. So, I mean, and I really can trace all that stuff back to setting a goal, knowing what I wanted for my life and having that vision. And then every single day working at it and not getting caught up with having perfection, because I've failed a lot too, but I always looked for progress. And I knew where I was headed, and I knew all the days weren't going to be rosy, and we were going to have some hard days. In my book, I talk about the time that me and my wife separated, and, our marriage was, 1 or 2 harsh words away from not surviving. And, I was, 1 or 2 decisions away from losing everything during the '08 recession. So I wanted to pull back the curtain on my book and really show people that, people see somebody who's kind of has some success and they think it was either overnight or they think they never had any issues. And that was the one thing that, with my book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, was I wanted to pull back the curtain because, where I'm at now, it was a long haul. And it took a lot of work. There were a lot of blood, sweat, and tears involved in it. And my work's not over. I mean, success is not an event. It's a journey. And it's a journey
never ends.
It never ends. It never ends. So yeah, that was kind of what I'm trying to do with this book. And you're talking about being a victim. I mean, the thing is, as soon as you give away You know, the one thing in our program is we take 100% responsibility for our success, no matter what. We're 100% responsible for it, because as soon as you give anything away, as soon as you start blaming it on somebody else, you start blaming it on the economy, you start blaming it on other things. Now you've given away all the power to fix it. And
Yep.
I can't fix it because it's his fault. I can't fix it because the economy sucks. I can't fix it because my parents didn't. Now all the power's gone, and now you have to wait for something else to happen. But when you take that 100% responsibility, then you're in control and you can set about fixing it. And the way that you fix things is by making different choices. I have this belief: you are exactly where you choose to be. And in your health, if you're 50 pounds overweight, I'm sorry, but you choose to be there.
Can't agree more.
And you know what? And the fact that you chose to be there, you can also choose not to be there. You're in control. And that's what I want to portray to people, because as soon as they do that, as soon as they get rid of that victim mindset and they realize that they are a product of their own choices, you'll never change them. You're going to show them that potential that lies inside of them. And once they see that potential, once they see that version of themselves that they're capable of being, and we're all capable of being, these wonderful people, once you show them that, they'll never be the same and they'll never settle for anything less.
I love it, man. And I resonate so much with your message, because we have a lot of the same talking points, man. Like, the reality is nobody becomes successful overnight. Like, there's a small fraction of people, there's some exceptions, right? You have your Bitcoin millionaires, right? Like, that might be the little percentage where it's like, okay, but would you call them successful, or would you call them lucky, right? Now they've got all this money, but like, have they done anything that's really worthy of calling successful, right? So I think that these little minor exceptions, they're not even relevant to what we're talking about. And I think the reality is when you start talking about failure, okay, most people, I love that you talk progress over perfection, because one of the things in our private community is like, look, man, like, we got a lot of guys in there. Our program, our high level program is 6 months, right? And these guys come in and it's a lifestyle program. This is not, hey, come lose as much weight as you can in 6 weeks. This is, hey, come learn our system, implement our system into your life, and you're literally never going to have to look back as long as you show up every week. This is a permanent solution. It's a full lifestyle. And so one thing that we see a lot is it's a 6-month journey with us, and you're going to have bad days. Bad days happen, man. Life is going to kick you in the balls, and you got to be able to get up and push forward. And so we talk about failing forward and talk about progress over perfection a lot, because, going back to the silver lining stuff with your story, the reality is in every single day, we're very big on documenting wins and taking credit for our small victories. Because here's the thing is, like, I had a client the other day. This is a great story. So he messages me and he says, hey man, like, I don't know what's going on. I'm an emotional eater. I really screwed up this morning. I ate I think he said cereal or donuts or something. And I started off with a soda, and like, I am a wreck today. And so I'm like, look, man, let me talk you off the cliff here, because it's only 11 o'clock. You have the rest of the day to turn this damn thing around and get some wins under your belt, so that you don't have that cloud hanging over your head saying this was a shitty day. And this dude, like, literally it was that light bulb moment, right? He was like, you know what? Like, that's exactly what I needed to hear. So he messaged me later. He's like, all right, I ate healthy for lunch. I ate healthy for my mid-afternoon snack. I got my ass to the gym, even though it was really late. And today was a huge win for me. And I'm like, if more people could see the light like that guy did, man, like, we would have a whole entirely different society. Because that victim mentality that you're talking about, that is the stuff that floods social media. It's like, the whole thing behind the stimulus checks, right? Like, you go onto social media and see all these people talking about, where's my check? Where's my check? And I'm thinking to myself, like, how about you do something to not need that check, right? And I get there's circumstances where people don't have a lot of, like, if this was back when the story that you told about your life, if that happened during this time, then yeah, your mom would really need that damn check. But it's that victim mentality where you want to depend on others and you want to blame others for where you're at in life. So I love that you brought that up, because if you're 50 pounds overweight, you're choosing to be there, unless you're actively making decisions today to get better. And so I think that's so powerful, man. And I definitely resonate with that. So let's get into a little bit more about your book. So when you made the decision to write the book, was this a random decision? Or I want to write a book because I've got all this shit that I want to share? Or had you calculated this for a few years? Like, you know what? I know that I've got a lot of value to add to the world. Talk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I talked about some of those businesses that I started, and a few years ago, I was able to exit those businesses and get to the point in my life where, you determine, okay, what would I do if money and time didn't matter? And, I was reflecting upon my life and started reflecting why I'd lived the life that I lived, and specifically started out where I started out. And, the events that I just told you, I went to the Air Force. I never moved back to that town, because of all the hurt and all the it just weakened me.
Yeah.
And the only person that I ever told that story to outside of my town was my wife before I married her. And I figured, okay, she deserves to know, but I never told, I never told anybody else. I never told my kids. I never told my friends or coworkers, because it weakened me. And I just wanted to get away from it and escape it. And, for the first time, when I would say my last name, that, people wouldn't judge me over it because they knew the circumstances. So I didn't want anybody to know about it. But then, when I'm determining, okay, what am I going to do? And, I started thinking about goals and personal development, and I live this life for that reason. I started to give that exact thing that happened to me a positive meaning. And one of our philosophies is things only have the meaning that you're willing to give them. And the same exact events that used to weaken me and make me, cringe, all of a sudden now they strengthen me and they energize me, because I could share that message with other people. And the events didn't change. The only thing that changed was the meaning that I was willing to give them.
I love it.
And, I started to do that, and I saw what goals and personal development had done in my life. And I saw how many other people just struggled in achieving their goals. I love the story that you tell about the guy who, had a bad morning and, probably was ready to throw his hands up and just go off the wagon the entire day. Well, we're in January right now. 92% of people have already failed on their New Year's resolutions. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to throw their hands up and they're going to quit until next January 1st.
Mm-hmm. And likely fail again.
Right. It's not just a morning. It's an entire year that they're not going to work towards achieving their goals. And that's why I started I Got Smarter. And that's why I developed the app to help people, give them the tools, the knowledge, and the support to finally stick with their goals and understand you don't have to be perfect, but don't waste time. Time is our most precious resource. There's nothing that you can ever do to get a second of it back. And so we should never, ever waste it. And, that's what we're trying to do, and the book was just something that, I knew I had a pretty unique origin story and a unique life. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to share that with people. I wanted to pull back the curtain on what my life was, my struggles, my heartaches, and also my successes, to let them know that, you're not the same person that you always have to be. And that was the message that I wanted to get off with that book. And, the key message is I don't want people to be victims of their circumstances. I want them to be product of their choices. I want to show them how to do that, why to do that, inspire them to do that, motivate them to do that each and every day.
No, it's awesome, man. And yeah, look, your origin story, I'm sure there's people out there who you might be able to categorize as a worse or a more challenging upbringing than you have. But I haven't met many people, with a more intense story than yours has. But you're literally the definition of life happens for you and not to you. And I think the mindset shift that you had when you started realizing that, like, holy shit, like my story needs to be out there more, because people need to realize that, that you might be going through some challenging times, but like what you went through was such a dark place. Like you dealt with years upon years upon years of challenge after challenge after challenge at such a young age. What you saw and what you what you, we'll call it consumed on a daily basis, man. Like that's stuff that scars a lot of people for life. And the fact that you've been able to pivot and use that as a motivator and an inspiration for others is so powerful, because the flip side of that could have been, Nelson keeps his story locked up in his mind for the rest of his life, doesn't share it with anybody because it hurts you so much and you don't want to talk about it. And now, like the level of impact that you had a potential now that you're living out is non-existent. And I would almost look back on that. You could almost twist it and say, you know what? Like if you would have kept that story in and and took that to the grave with you, like you could almost look at that as selfish, right? Like I'm not sure where you stand in the higher power region, but like that life happens for you and not to you. And I think it's your duty almost to share that story because it's such an inspiring story, man. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that was, that was what I was thinking when I wrote the book, and I knew, I've got a lot of family back in Pennsylvania who still live in that small town and, are still dealing with some of that. And as I wrote this book, I was fearful that I was going to bring up some of the past and they were going to have to deal with it. And I didn't want to hurt anybody. But man, I just felt, this obligation to share my story with the world. And I know, there hasn't been a day that this book, has been published that somebody hasn't reached out to me and said what an inspiration it's been and what motivation it's been. I mean, I was at one of my son's baseball games and a guy came up to me and he's like, you know what, our older sons played, 5-7 years ago. And he's like, I looked at you and your family and just thought you guys had it all together and you guys were perfect. And then, holy crap, I read your book. And he's like, you know what? I started treating my wife better. And I started to, show her appreciation and as opposed to having expectations. And it's really changed. And, to see that you went through that and, that you made it out, it inspired me. And things like that just go to your heart and you say, you know what, I did the right thing. I don't care, if there's haters out there that feel like I shouldn't have done the book. I did it for those people. And I don't regret one iota of it.
The reality is this, man, like if that book inspires one person to be a better person in their life, like just one person, it was worth every bit of the work that you put into it. That's the reality, right? Like anytime, like we can take this down to a micro level. Like if I write a thought provoked social media post, right? Like I put some real thought into it, not just a picture of me and my kids and saying, hey, we're having a great day, like a legit post. And somebody reads that and messages me and say, you know what, like that really hit home. Like it inspired me. If that post changes one person's trajectory during the day, it was worth the 30 minutes that I put into it. Right. And so on a macro level with your book, being able to touch the lives of thousands, that it was 100% worth it for you. And so my next question is this, like you mentioned kids. How many kids do you have?
I have 3 boys.
3 boys. How old are they?
20, 23, 18, and 15.
Okay, cool. So let me ask you this then, in terms of your kids. So with your story, obviously, and with your book out there, like this is not secret news. What was, when they were old enough to really grasp the concept behind what happened to you at a young age, what was their reaction when you talked to them about that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't believe it. I mean, because again, I never shared that with them. And so, I remember when I was writing the stories and I would read them to them on a day trip or something, we're in the car for a few hours on a trip and they were just blown away. And some of the things that they felt, entitled, and that's the thing, we try to do everything for our kids and we might be taking away some of that drive or determination. And that was always one of my fears. And then I would read the book to them and now, of course they've read it, but I think they realize, where this drive and determination comes from. And that's the great thing about goals. And we talked about just touching one person. Goals aren't just for the person who achieves those goals. Goals are generational. I mean, and they're going to change. They're going to change everybody in that family from that time on. And, I'm a perfect example of that, achieving that one goal of becoming that first person to graduate from college. I mean, not only did that change my life, my kids are living a drastically different life because of that,
No doubt.
And their family's going to live a drastically different life. So that's the huge thing. When you're achieving goals, you're not just affecting your life, you're affecting all those people around you, your family, your coworkers. And that's why I got into this business, because I see the power to change, people's worlds and
impact, man. It's impact.
Yeah. And when you change a person's world, you change enough people's world, you're changing the world. And what better legacy do you have than to be working at that every single day?
No, I can't agree more. I love it, man. I love your story. And so I think it's a perfect opportunity to transition a little bit, because we're still on topic here. But you talk about goals. And one thing that, we actually put an episode out not long ago based around this entire topic. And so you talk about goals, and you're like, a lot of the things that we've discussed today is about setting these goals, because that's what drives you. Right. And, all about SMART goals. We don't have to dive into that. But one thing that we've been big on lately, because I think this holds a lot of power, is when people start talking about setting goals. And we'll use a weight loss goal, for example. We'll go back to the guy that's 50 pounds that's choosing to be there right now, and also can choose not to be there. Okay. So he sets this goal that, over the next, like, say 6 months, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, which is very realistic. We've got guys in our program right now doing 75 and 80 pounds in 6 months, which is insane. But when you take a really shitty, piss poor lifestyle, and then you implement our strategies with sleep, stress management, nutrition, and fitness, all the stars align, and it's magical, man. It's amazing to see these guys literally changing their life and having a permanent solution. But one thing that we're big on is not just setting these goals, because it's great to talk about that, right? Like, if you have a 50-pound weight loss goal, that's fun to think about, because it's like, all right, like, what am I going to do today to get to that goal? Every day that you wake up, if you're really driven to do it, you're going to do it, right? That's the bottom line. Like, and we talked not long ago about those people out there. They're saying, my whole family was obese growing up, so I'm just meant to be fat. And I hate that. Like, it despises me. I'm like, dude, you don't understand that is not a genetics thing, right? You can choose to get away from that, buck the trend, and set a new example for your family moving forward, so that you stop that, right? Like, you're the line in the sand, and now your family can be healthy and fit moving forward. So in saying all that, we are very big on not just setting goals for yourself and raising the ceiling, but also raising the floor. So when you start to set these minimum standards, and I'll use working out for an example. For me in my life, I'm a 4-day-a-week guy in the gym, okay? I will not allow myself, it cannot happen for me to get there less than 3 days in a week, or I'm not right mentally. I know that that's weighing on my conscience. I know that I'm better than that, and there is zero excuse for me not to make it there at least 3 days. I'm set on 4, but sometimes life happens, right? And so that is my minimum standard in terms of exercise. There's minimum standards for everything. But what is your take on that? Because goals are easy to talk about, but I think that true progress is made because you talk about progress over perfection, right? It's not always going to be perfect. So when you raise your ceiling, you have those stars to shoot for. But when you raise your floor, you're preventing the backslide or the backpedaling. So what is your take on that? And do you agree with that? And kind of give us your feedback on that kind of concept.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about this in my book, The Unlucky Sperm Club.
I love it.
I call it going into the weeds. Okay. And, I tell the story of, we had this ball field in our little town, and, it would get overgrown until somebody would go out there and mow it and take care of it. But on either side of the ball field grew the weeds, and you knew exactly where those weeds were. And that's the way things need to be in our lives is, right. you have to have those absolutes. And when you went into the weeds, you knew you went in because there were jagger bushes and nettles and things like that. You weren't making it out of the weeds unscathed. And I set those. I mean, I have a weight, that if I ever get to that weight, I've got to seriously get back motivated, and I won't go over that weight because that it's a slippery slope, right?
Yep.
You get into the holidays and maybe you're going to relax a little bit. You're going to have a few more slices of cake than you typically do, or a few more desserts. And then all of a sudden, you're at that weight. And then when you go over that weight, it's a lot easier to go another 5 pounds over and another 10 pounds. So, I mean, my life, I've had that target weight. And if I ever get close to it, it's like, okay, you're back on, watching your carbs, you're back on, working out, more regularly and all that stuff. So we absolutely have to have, those absolutes in our lives. And that's what's going to determine the life that we're going to live.
I can't agree more.
I'm a black or white guy, and, it's a mess when life turns to gray because there's none of those absolutes. When black and white start to just mold together and you don't have those standards and those values and those absolutes, then you really have nothing to shoot for.
You're
and then
coasting.
You're reacting to whatever, and you don't have that vision. It makes for a miserable life if you don't. But if you have that vision, if you have those goals, if you have those standards, if you have those absolutes, you always know where you're heading, and you always know when you got to get back on track.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. We hit on a lot of great topics today. This is definitely going to be a popular interview. I'm excited for this one to be published because there are so many things. Like obviously I resonate with your story. I have a pretty dark backstory myself, not nearly where you're at, but like we all come from different places, man. And the reality is you've got to just pick yourself up and keep moving forward because we talk about this in terms of health, but this is just life. Like when you can embrace health and life as a journey, like we go back to the 50-pound guy, right? Like once you lose those 50 pounds, like shit doesn't just stop. Like you don't just go back to your old ways. This is something that you've got to embrace as a journey. And I think when people can look at it as such, right? Like we set these goals. Well, what happens when you accomplish that goal? You've set a lot of goals in your life and you've accomplished a lot of goals in your life. Anybody that comes from a background of success has the same, right? We all set new goals and we keep raising our floor and keep raising our floor. And I think that when you have that mentality and you can embrace it as a journey and not just, okay, well, I need to hit this goal and then I'll just do whatever. It's that coasting mentality. It's the living the life where you're not being proactive. You're not being intentional about your decisions. Again, it's that gray area that you talked about, man. So this has been great. I love it. I can't wait for it to be published, like I said. So before we close shop, I do want to not just give you the opportunity to talk about, where we can find you, but let's go with this first. What would be like for anybody that's out there struggling? You've given a lot of great advice today, but what is one piece of advice that you would give, like the 50-pound guy, right? He just can't get it together, or maybe it's somebody out there who is trying to start a business and they feel like the world is crashing down on them, which was me when I started my business for sure. What's a piece of advice that you can give in terms of like mindset that might be able to help that one person that we kept referring to out there move forward and make some progress?
Well, my best advice is start now. I mean, hopefully you've heard this interview and it's inspired you and it's motivated you. Don't wait. Start now. The only place that we can ever start is where we're at. And, the problem is that people want to wait. They want to wait for some artificial date like New Year's or next month, or they want all the traffic lights to be green, before they head down their journey. And it doesn't happen. And, success is a lot like walking through fog. Like, you can't see very far in front of you, but every step that you take on your journey, a little more of that landscape opens up and you start to see more and more and more. And, don't wait. Don't have paralysis by analysis. Do something now, because the one thing we know is we don't have a knowledge problem. we have an execution problem. We know
Love
what we're
it.
supposed to do. We just don't do what we know we're supposed to do. And, so do it now, start where you're at, and, start on those little steps. And eventually you'll look back and you won't even imagine where you end up, as long as you start today and don't stop.
I love that, man. You mentioned that the knowledge problem. We talk about, we don't lack for information, we lack for application, and that's spot on. And then I love the analogy about the fog, man. Like that, I've never heard that before. And as soon as you said it, I'm like, holy shit! Like that's exactly what I went through, and I'm still going through. Right? Like this is a journey, and it is. And the last thing that I wanted to add to that was, what you just said pretty much sums up the old saying that is, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is now. And so you're spot on. Can't agree more. So before we close shop, where can we find you? You mentioned the book. My podcast company will get all this in the show notes as well. I love the title of the book. So let us know any websites, any resources, any social media platforms that our listeners can connect with you, because I would imagine there's going to be a lot of people that hear this and say, you know what, I want to learn more about that guy.
Yeah. You can go to nelsontressler.com and everything is there. The book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, is available everywhere books are sold, but Amazon's probably the easiest. And our app, IGOTSMARTER, all one word, is available on Apple and Android, and you can download it at the App Store. And right now we're offering it for 30 days free. So people go out and try it and see what a difference it makes in their lives. And after that, it's $9 a month. So, we're looking for people to get out there and change their lives with it.
Hey man, for $9 a month, if it's going to make your life better, that's the price of one fast food meal, right? And you cut one fast food meal, you're getting healthier and you're having a better life. So I love it, man. Well, look, I greatly appreciate you coming on the show today. This is going to be definitely a popular interview. So we'll definitely have to do it again in the future, man. I love it. I'd love to reconnect with you and see what you're up to down the road. So thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
You got it. Have a fantastic week.
You too.